The late afternoon sun hung low over Nashville, Tennessee, casting a golden glow across the asphalt of Music Row, where the heart of American music pulsed a mile away from the city's neon-lit honky-tonks. At Soundwave Studios, a legendary recording space nestled among low-slung brick buildings, history whispered through the walls. This was the hallowed ground where Johnny Cash had growled into a microphone, where Dolly Parton's voice had soared like a mountain breeze, and where countless dreams had been pressed into vinyl. The air inside carried the scent of polished wood, warm from decades of sunlight, mingled with the faint hum of vintage Marshall amps stacked in the corner like silent sentinels. Outside, half a mile down the road, a jukebox in a dive bar spun Merle Haggard's Mama Tried, its twang drifting faintly through the open windows of passing pickup trucks, blending with the distant rumble of traffic and the chatter of aspiring songwriters on the sidewalk. The studio's heavy glass door swung shut with a soft thud, sealing out the world's noise as a man stepped into the lobby. Keanu Reeves stood still for a moment, his presence as unassuming as a shadow at dusk. A faded flannel shirt hung loosely over his frame, the red and black plaid worn soft from years of wear, tucked into jeans that had seen better days. His boots, scuffed and caked with red Tennessee dirt, left faint tracks on the polished oak floor, each step measured, deliberate. Slung over one shoulder was a battered Fender bass case, its black shell chipped at the edges, a peeling sticker on the side proclaiming, "Played from coast to coast." The case sagged slightly, as if carrying not just an instrument but the weight of 1,000 late-night gigs in smoky bars from Chicago to San Diego. Keanu's dark hair, streaked with gray, fell across his forehead, and his eyes, quiet and steady, took in the room without a trace of expectation. He didn't look like he belonged in a place designed for platinum records and Grammy dreams. And the receptionist, a young woman named Tara with a platinum blonde ponytail and a phone glued to her hand, didn't hesitate to let him know. "Deliveries go around back," Tara said, barely glancing up from her Instagram feed, her acrylic nails tapping the counter. Her voice carried the bored drawl of someone who'd seen too many wannabes walk through the door, each one clutching a demo tape and a delusion. Keanu didn't flinch, his expression as calm as a still lake. "I'm not delivering," he said, his voice low, almost a murmur, like a bass note plucked soft. "I'm here for the session. Name's Keanu." Tara's eyes flicked up, narrowing as she took him in. Flannel, boots, that beat-up case. She snorted, popping her gum. "You're the bassist?" Her tone dripped with skepticism, as if he'd just claimed to be Elvis reincarnated. She leaned forward, sizing him up. "What, you play at open mics down at the Bluebird or something?" Keanu's lips twitched. Not quite a smile. "Something like that," he said, shifting the bass case slightly. "Got a call from Jake about the rhythm slot." Tara rolled her eyes, already dismissing him as another dreamer who'd wandered too far from the dive bars. She jabbed the intercom button with a manicured finger. "Yo, Mia, some guy's down here for the bass slot. Says his name's Keanu. Looks like he just rolled in from a thrift store." Her smirk widened as she released the button, leaning back in her chair with the confidence of someone who thought she'd just won a round of bar trivia. Upstairs, in Studio A, producer Mia Caldwell sat behind a mixing console that gleamed under the soft glow of overhead lights. At 32, Mia was Nashville's rising star, a hotshot who'd produced hits for pop-country crossover acts and snagged a Grammy nomination 2 years back. But the weight of a failing label deal hung over her like a storm cloud, her inbox flooded with demands for a chart topper to save her contract. She chewed a granola bar, her sneakers propped on the console, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. The studio buzzed with controlled chaos. Backup singers warmed up in the vocal booth, sound techs adjusted mic stands, and a neon sign on the wall flickered Soundwave Soul. Mia's crew, a tight-knit group of young professionals, traded banter, laced with industry jargon. their confidence bordering on arrogance. When Tara's voice crackled through the intercom, Mia groaned, tossing her granola bar wrapper onto the desk. "Another Bandcamp reject?" she muttered, her voice sharp with stress. Her assistant Ethan, a lanky sound tech with a man bun, chuckled. "Bet he's got a SoundCloud with 3 followers and a cover of Sweet Home Alabama." The room snickered. The backup singer, Zoe, glancing nervously at her lyric sheet, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. Mia rubbed her temples, the pressure from the label deal gnawing at her. She'd built her career on spotting talent, but lately, every session felt like a gamble, and she had no patience for long shots. "Bring him up," she said into the intercom, her tone clipped. "Let's see how fast this crashes and burns." Downstairs, Keanu waited, his hand resting lightly on the bass case. He didn't pace or check his phone, just stood there, grounded, like a man who'd learned to weather storms long ago. Beneath the flannel, his heart carried a promise, one he'd made years back to his mentor, a blues bassist named Otis, who died penniless in a Chicago boarding house. Otis had taught Keanu to play, not for fame or money, but for the soul of the music, urging him to keep the groove alive no matter who's listening. Keanu had walked away from music a decade ago, burned by a label that promised stardom and delivered betrayal. But Jake's call had pulled him back, and now, at 52, he stood in Soundwave Studios, not for glory, but to honor Otis's memory. The promise burned quiet and steady, a flame no one in the room could see. As Tara led him to the elevator, her smirk lingered, but Keanu's gaze stayed forward, his boots tracking faint red dirt across the floor. Outside, a black SUV rolled to a stop across the street, its tinted window lowering just enough to reveal Eddie Murphy's face, his signature half grin catching the fading sunlight. "Still got that old fender," Eddie murmured, his voice warm with memory. He stepped out, sunglasses in hand, sensing the moment brewing inside the studio, a moment where silence would soon give way to sound, and a lesson would unfold for those who forgot to listen. Keanu Reeves stepped into Studio A at Soundwave Studios, the door closing with a soft click behind him, muffling the distant twang of Music Row a mile away. The room buzzed with Nashville's ambition, mic stands gleamed under fluorescent lights, and a neon sign flickered, Soundwave Soul. Keanu, responding to a last-minute call from his old friend Jake, carried his battered Fender bass, its worn case slung low. His flannel shirt and jeans, faded like a well-loved song, marked him as an outsider in this polished space. At 50, he looked more like a road-weary troubadour than a studio pro, and the crew noticed. Mia Caldwell, the 32-year-old producer, sat behind the mixing console, her eyes flicking between a laptop and a looming label deadline. Stress sharpened her edge, and she barely glanced at Keanu before scoffing. "This the guy?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Looks like he plays for tips at Tootsie's." The crew, sound tech Ethan, with his man bun and smirk, and backup singer Zoe, clutching her lyric sheet, snickered. Ethan leaned over, muttering, "Bet he's got a banjo in that case." The laughter stung, but Keanu's face stayed calm, his eyes steady, carrying the weight of his promise to his late mentor, Otis. Mia waved a hand, dismissive. "All right, Grandpa. This ain't a garage band. It's a pro session. Midnight on the Cumberland, blues rock, 90 BPM. You fall off the beat, you're out." She nodded to Ethan, who grinned and subtly turned the bass gain to a whisper, ensuring Keanu's notes would barely register. "Show us what you got," Mia said, her tone mocking, like she was humoring a street busker. Keanu set his case down, the sticker played from coast to coast catching the light. He unzipped it, revealing the chipped fender, and sat on a stool, adjusting a single tuning peg by ear. Zoe, a nervous 20-something overlooked by the crew, caught his eye. Her hands trembled, her confidence shaky under Mia's scrutiny. Keanu gave her a quiet nod, a small gesture of encouragement that said, "You got this." Zoe's shoulders relaxed slightly, a flicker of warmth passing between them, unnoticed by the others. "Play when you're ready," Mia said, leaning back with a smirk. Keanu's fingers brushed the strings, but the amp stayed near silent, Ethan's sabotage at work. "What's that? A ghost note?" Mia quipped, sparking chuckles. Keanu paused, his voice low. "Your gain's off," Mia shrugged, feigning innocence. "Sounds fine to me. Try harder, cowboy." The room laughed again, but Zoe's eyes lingered on Keanu, sensing something the others missed. A kindness, a strength, hidden in his silence. In Studio A of Soundwave Studios, a mile from Nashville's Music Row, Keanu Reeves sat on a worn stool, his battered Fender bass resting across his lap. The neon Soundwave Soul sign flickered above, casting a soft glow on his flannel shirt and Tennessee dirt-caked boots. Mia Caldwell's sabotage had left the amp nearly silent, her smirk daring him to fail. Keanu's fingers, steady as a craftsman's, reached for the amp's volume knob. He turned it, the hum rising like a distant storm over the Cumberland River. Without a word, he adjusted the strap, closed his eyes, and began to play Midnight on the Cumberland, a blues rock track at 90 BPM, its rhythm calling for a groove as deep as the South itself. The first note hit like rain on a tin roof, steady, deliberate, full of ache. Each pluck was raw, textured, alive, weaving a line that felt like gravel crunching under tires on a back road at dusk. The bass line wasn't just music, it was memory, carrying the soul of smoky Beale Street bars and late-night Chicago jams, a promise kept to his late mentor, Otis. The groove rolled out, syncopated and warm, filling the studio's 500-square-foot space with a pulse that seemed to hum in the walls. Keanu's hands moved with quiet precision, sliding, muting, plucking, each note landing like a stone in still water, rippling through the room. The crew, primed to mock, froze. Ethan, the sound tech with the man bun, stood behind the console, his foot tapping unconsciously to the rhythm, betraying his earlier smirk. In the vocal booth, Zoe, the nervous backup singer, swayed gently, her hands loosening around her lyric sheet, her nerves easing as if the bass line had steadied her heartbeat. Mia Caldwell, her confidence a brittle mask, gripped her coffee mug, her knuckles whitening as the groove undercut her expectations. The room, once buzzing with snark, fell silent. The music's pull universal, undeniable, like a hymn sung under Nashville's stars. Ethan leaned toward a mic, his voice low, almost reverent. "Auto-tune would have ruined this," he muttered, a jab at the industry's obsession with polished, soulless tracks. Keanu's playing was the opposite, raw, human, a rebuke to the viral beats flooding streaming platforms in 2025. His notes wove a story, not of fame, but of resilience. Each pause heavy with tension, each resolution precise, like an answer to a prayer no one knew they'd whispered. Mia's smirk faded, her eyes locked on Keanu, her certainty cracking like dry clay. The studio, for 2 minutes, held its breath, caught in a sound that didn't demand attention but commanded it, proving that true art needed no spotlight, only ears willing to hear. The silence in Soundwave Studios, a mile from Nashville's Music Row, was electric. Keanu Reeves' bass line for Midnight, on the Cumberland still echoing in the 500-square-foot room. His battered Fender rested on his lap, its "Played from Coast to Coast" sticker glinting under the neon Soundwave Soul sign. Mia Caldwell, her confidence shaken, stood frozen behind the mixing console, her crew, Ethan and Zoe, stunned by the groove that had just rewritten the air. Then, a slow, deliberate clap broke the quiet, followed by a familiar laugh that rolled like thunder. The studio door swung open, and Eddie Murphy strode in, his signature grin lighting up the space, trailed by his protege, a young rapper named Jaden, whose AirPods dangled around his neck. "Keanu, you still hauling that old Fender?" Eddie said, his voice warm, teasing, cutting through the tension like a summer breeze. He leaned against the doorframe, sunglasses in hand, his presence commanding the room. "Played with this guy at a 2005 New Orleans Jazz Fest," he continued, his laugh echoing. "Power went out, amps half dead, but Keanu kept the groove going, fingers bleeding, crowd roaring under the rain. Man's a legend." Jaden nodded, pulling out his phone. "Check his Bonnaroo set on YouTube. Went viral last year. Straight up iconic." The room gasped, phones clattering to the floor. Mia's coffee mug slipped from her hand, splashing across the console. "Keanu Reeves," she stammered, her face paling as the name hit like a chord struck on a grand piano. Ethan's jaw dropped, his man bun tilting as he leaned forward. Zoe, in the vocal booth, pressed her hands to the glass, eyes wide, whispering, "I knew he looked familiar." Eddie stepped closer to Mia, his grin fading, voice sharpening. "You saw a guy in dusty boots and thought nobody. Talent don't need a Grammy to shine." He gestured to Keanu, who sat calmly, his flannel shirt untouched by the room's chaos. "You judged him by his threads, not his sound. That's the problem with this industry. Chasing flash over soul," Jaden chimed in, scrolling his phone. "Y'all obsessed with TikTok beats and auto-tune. Keanu's out here keeping it real. No filter." The confrontation stung, Mia's arrogance crumbling like dry Tennessee clay. Eddie's words sparked murmurs among the crew, a quiet discussion about the music world's fixation on image. Viral hits, polished looks, over raw merit. It resonated with Nashville's roots, where grit and heart once defined stars like Johnny Cash. Keanu, unfazed, adjusted his bass strap, his silence louder than any retort. Eddie clapped a hand on his shoulder. "This man don't need to prove nothing. He plays for the music, not your applause." The room fell quiet again, not with awe, but with the weight of a truth too heavy to dodge, a lesson in listening etched into the studio's walls. In the wake of Eddie Murphy's reveal in Soundwave Studios, a mile from Nashville's Music Row, the air in Studio A felt heavy, charged with the weight of Keanu Reeves' bass line and the truth it carried. Keanu sat on the stool, his battered Fender bass resting against his flannel shirt, its played from coast to coast sticker catching the flicker of the neon Soundwave Soul sign. Mia Caldwell stood behind the console, her face flushed, her confidence shattered. Ethan and Zoe, the sound tech and backup singer, exchanged glances, the room's earlier mockery now a distant echo. Keanu, unfazed by the stunned silence, unplugged his bass with a gentle tug. "I came to play, not to prove," he said, his voice low, steady, like a note plucked soft but true. He reached into his case, pulled out a handwritten chord sheet, and placed it on the stool, the title scrawled in pencil, "For the Room That Needs to Hear." Unlike a cold flash drive, the paper felt alive, a piece of his soul left behind, raw and authentic. Keanu slung the bass over his shoulder and walked toward the door, his boots leaving faint traces of Tennessee dirt on the 500-square-foot studio floor. No gloating, no glance at the awestruck crew, just a quiet exit, as if the music had said all he needed. Outside, Nashville's golden sunset bathed the parking lot in amber, the horizon glowing like a steel guitar's hum. Near a beat-up pickup truck, a small crowd had gathered, drawn by whispers of the studio's drama. At the center stood Keanu, kneeling beside a 13-year-old girl clutching a cheap bass, its strings dull from neglect. Her small hands struggled with the frets, but Keanu's voice was patient. "Feel the strings, don't fight them," he said, guiding her thumb to rest lightly on the neck. "Let the sound come to you." The girl's dad, a burly man in a Titan's cap, stood nearby, filming on his phone. He leaned toward a friend, whispering, "That's the guy from Dogstar Man." The girl, her braids swaying as she plucked a shaky note, looked up at Keanu, her eyes wide. "Are you famous?" she asked, her voice small but curious. Keanu's lips curved into a gentle smile. "Just a guy who loves the sound," he replied, adjusting her grip. The note hummed clearer, and her face lit up. A spark of confidence kindled. Zoe, watching from the studio window, clutched Keanu's chord sheet, her fingers tracing the penciled notes. Mia, beside her, stared out. The lesson sinking in true artistry needed no spotlight, only open ears. Keanu's mentorship, set against Nashville's sunset, echoed the city's heart, community, grit, and the quiet power of passing music on, one note at a time. In the quiet of Soundwave Studios, a mile from Nashville's Music Row, Mia Caldwell stood alone at the mixing console, the neon Soundwave Soul sign casting a soft glow across her face. The 500-square-foot room, once alive with the snark and swagger of her crew, now felt hollow, humbled by Keanu Reeves's bass line and Eddie Murphy's sharp truth. Mia's hands trembled as she saved Keanu's track for midnight on the Cumberland, unedited, its raw groove untouched by her usual layers of polish. The handwritten chord sheet Keanu had left on the stool, titled "For the Room That Needs to Hear," lay beside her, its penciled notes a quiet rebuke to her earlier arrogance. Her reflection in the studio glass looked smaller, softer, listening now. The weight of her failing label deal, once a storm cloud over her career, seemed trivial compared to the lesson she'd just learned. True talent didn't demand a spotlight. It only asked for open ears. Mia's redemption took root in action, not just regret. That evening, she emailed a local music school, offering free studio time for young musicians, a concrete step toward giving back, unlike the vague shame that had lingered in the original story's aftermath. She included Keanu's track in the offer, a gesture to honor his sound and share it with those who might listen without prejudice. As she typed, her eyes kept drifting to the chord sheet, its creased edges a reminder of what she'd almost missed. "I judged a book by its cover," she whispered to herself, the Nashville skyline twinkling through the window a mile away. Never again. 2 weeks later, under a starlit sky on the banks of the Cumberland River, a charity concert unfolded, its stage set on a wooden platform just 200 feet from the water's edge. The air carried the cool dampness of the river, mingling with the scent of grilled hot dogs from food trucks and the faint strum of acoustic guitars warming up. Keanu Reeves stood at the center of it all, his battered Fender bass slung low, its "Played from Coast to Coast" sticker catching the stage lights. The crowd, locals in cowboy boots, kids clutching glow sticks, musicians with calloused hands, swayed to his groove, a bluesy hum that blended with the night air like a whisper from the South itself. No one cared about his name, only the music, each note a thread tying them to the heart of Nashville's soul. In the back, Mia stood beside Zoe, the backup singer whose nerves Keanu had eased with a single nod. Ethan, the sound tech, was there too, his man bun bobbing as he nodded to the rhythm. Jaden, Eddie Murphy's protege, leaned against a railing, filming the set for his followers, a nod to the viral Bonnaroo clip he'd mentioned. The young girl Keanu had taught, her cheap bass now tuned, sat cross-legged near the stage, her dad whispering, "That's him, kid, the guy from Dogstar." Eddie himself lingered at the crowd's edge, his grin soft, watching his old friend play with the same quiet fire he'd seen in New Orleans years ago. Keanu's bassline wove through the night, not loud or showy, but true, like the river's steady flow. It carried the weight of his promise to his mentor, Otis, a Chicago bluesman who'd taught him to play for the sound, not the applause. The crowd felt it, a connection deeper than fame, rooted in the American ideals of community and second chances. Mia, listening deeply, realized the music wasn't hers to own. It was her responsibility to share, to amplify, to hear. The lesson sank in Nashville. Anyone could walk through a door and change the room, if you just listened. The concert ended with a final note, soft but resonant, fading into the river's murmur. The crowd cheered, not for a celebrity, but for a sound that felt like home. Keanu stepped back, his flannel shirt damp with sweat, and gave a small nod, his eyes catching Mia's for a moment. There was no judgment, only clarity, a reminder to keep listening. As the stars glittered above the Cumberland, Mia clutched Keanu's chord sheet, its words a guide for the road ahead. This story, like Keanu's bass line, is a call to pause, to hear the quiet strength in those we might overlook. It teaches us that humility outshines arrogance, that community builds what ego destroys, and that second chances are America's heartbeat. Whether in a Nashville studio or a small-town bar, we're all part of this song, learning to listen one note at a time. To every one of you who joined us in this journey, thank you for hearing this story, for letting it resonate in your hearts. If it moved you, share it, spread it, and subscribe to our channel for more tales of music and meaning. Keep listening, because the next great sound might be waiting just beyond the silence.